I get asked this a decent amount, like, what to know before investing in real estate or how should I best prepare myself? And a lot of times this question comes alongside of just like improper expectations. And I would say that most people that ask this question are, they have in their head this idea that they're going to acquire a few properties. It's going to be passive income, mailbox money, money that comes in like clockwork, whether they do anything or not, and that they are going to retire early because they just have this consistent income that's like unshakable and more reliable than what they currently do for their active income. Or they have this notion that they currently hate what they're doing for their full time job, and that they have heard that real estate investing is this thing that can free them of that. And I think that both of those ideas or both of those thought patterns are going to get you in trouble. I think it's the improper expectations, and as your quote unquote journey in investing in real estate plays out, you're going to get more and more disappointed. So I think it's more prudent to look at real estate investing as like the oldest franchise model that exists. So there's this entire industry that is built around supporting real estate, right? Like you've got your contractors, all of the trades, people have had, shelter, places to live for as long as we've been around. And consequently, you've got someone close by that knows how to fix any issue that you can possibly have in real estate investing. So there's never going to be a situation that you come across in your real estate investing journey that someone else hasn't already solved. There's nothing new, there's nothing flashy, there's nothing unique or never before done as it pertains to real estate investing. So, in that sense, it would be possible for you to hire out every single issue that you ever have in real estate investing. And I think this is the reason why people will at some point call real estate investing passive income, is because it is quite possible to hire out every single thing that goes wrong inside of real estate investing. However, I would also say that any of these people selling franchises, your Subways, Little Caesars, any type of franchise, I don't think anywhere in those marketing materials would people call this passive income, right? It's a model that's already proven. It's a model that they will help you walk through, but they require a great deal of your time, energy, and effort. Chick-fil-A goes so far as to say that all of their locations must be owner occupied. And Chick-fil-A and only Chick-fil-A will decide if you operate at a high enough skill that they're going to let you get a second location, right? So I think that is a significantly better way to kind of posit real estate investing, not in this passive income. You will operate, and you will never hear one of these franchise owners say, oh, it's passive income. I just hired this guy to run it. I never have to check after him. I never have to question his numbers, right? If you hear a franchise owner say that, then it is going to be in short order that they're out of business. Consequently, in real estate investing, you've got some out of state investors, you've got some people that are fully swept by people marketing real estate investing, companies that make a decent amount of money selling real estate investing education or blogs, podcasts, whatever that posit it this way. Generally, I think if you peel behind the curtains, they make either a decent amount of money as like advertisers for realtors, loan officers, or something, people that you can actually buy stuff from, or they themselves are trying to sell you courses and try to make it sound like you can't have success without them. And you are kind of this thing that they constantly have to churn over in order for them to make the amount of money that they want to. These are the only people that will act like real estate investing is passive and that it's something that you can do on autopilot and consider mailbox money. If you, watch some investors. So at the insurance agency that I have, I write the insurance for a significant amount of out-of-state investors. And I would say that the 2 to 3 year mark is generally when I see a lot of out of state investors or people that got into real estate investing with the hopes of retiring shortly or getting this very consistent residual mailbox money income, start selling off their properties. And it has everything to do with their expectations being wrong going into it. On the flip side of that, one of my really good friends, when we met, he told me that he wanted to have 50 properties over the next 40 years, which is such an egregiously lenient amount of time in order for him to acquire that. And I think when you get started in real estate investing, your first goal that you need to hit the ground running with is to get more than 10 properties as quickly as possible. Now, while this is somewhat of an arbitrary number, the entire reason that I put 10 in that is that you really want to start playing off the law of averages or the law of large numbers. For as much as I say that, I really need to sit down and figure out what it's really called, this principle that I'm talking about. But the chances of you making enough money off like 1, 2, 3 rental properties to sustain that is pretty slim. For the most part, the way it's going to play out is one of these properties is going to have some sort of issue where you need to come up with a couple of grand. Well, by the time that issue comes up, you haven't yet budgeted for a couple of grand needed. With your 10% capital expenditures, 10% repairs, maintenance, which is the common way to limit your exposure on the real estate. That's what's taught a lot when you're analyzing properties. So, if you've got $200, $300 per month cash flow, you're talking about 10 months to get $3,000 to fix a plumbing issue or, an HVAC issue that comes up. So during those 10 months that you're kind of recovering from that expenditure, you're going to be really crossing your fingers that nothing else even remotely goes wrong with that property. And I think the chances of that happening are pretty slim. A rule of thumb that I came up with, again, rather arbitrarily, is that over the next like 50, 60 years of you owning a home, you're pretty much going to rebuild that entire home. And you should plan so accordingly. I did this thing when I was first starting out where I was trying to be super conservative, and I created like this capital expenditure calculator. And what I did was, let's say, it costs $1,000 to replace a water heater. And that water heater has an overall industry, kind of standard life expectancy of 10 years. Well, you're going to want to set aside over the next 10 years enough money to where 10 years passes, you've got $1,000 to pay for a new water heater. And if you go through and do that for every single item that has a life expectancy in that house, then you're going to realize that the amount of money that you need to set aside per month in order to do that is so high that you can't possibly have a cash flowing property or charge enough rent in order to cash flow. The market won't allow for that, right? So over the long term, making money from the cash flow of one or a handful of properties is going to be extraordinarily difficult over the long term without inviting deferred maintenance or putting things off for that person that you sell the property to next, right? However, once you cross that 10 threshold, and let's say, you're putting aside, 10% per month, or, the mass that comes along with having 10 properties. Well, now you've got $2,000, $3,000 per month coming in that you're able to address issues as they come up. So if a roof needs to be put on a property, then that's going to put you out of like 2 months worth of the money that you set aside in order to handle this, right? Or the cash flow, the quote unquote clockwork cash flow that you have that you are expecting every month. So if you are, planning on taking out $200, $300 per month, because that's what your analysis says, then what you're going to find is, sure, you can take that money back, but the chances of you needing to put that money back in order to handle an issue that's happening with one of your homes is going to be pretty high. However, once you get to that 10 property threshold, you're going to realize that the amount of times that you need to inject your own capital into it in order to sustain the properties is going to get smaller and smaller. So for my brother and I, when we went from 8 properties to 21 properties. We bought a package of 13 after we had 8 doors. So it was at 20 properties when we noticed that when we had 8 properties and fewer, we had this conversation with ourselves, a very painful conversation at the end of every month on how much money each of us needed to put into the business in order to, keep it going, just to die another day. Whereas once we crossed that 20 property threshold, we no longer had to have that conversation. The cash flow from all of those properties collectively took care of anything that went wrong with any of the properties that we had. So that is what your main goal should be at first, is to immediately get to 10 properties as quickly as possible so that the cash flow collectively from all of those properties can sustain itself. That way, any of your active income that you are bringing in and investing, now you can use that solely to acquire additional assets. On the months where you have an excess amount of capital coming in from those 10 properties, where you have the ability to reinvest that, that's going to allow you to, again, acquire assets at a greater rate of speed, which ultimately, once you get that sustainable portfolio where it is self-sufficient, it can pay for any of its issues, then you're getting into the ability where now you're going to be able to grow exponentially. Or if you don't have the aspirations of growing or scaling a large rental portfolio, you can start taking the money that comes in on a monthly basis as your cash flow, which, fundamentally what I just said is completely different from the people that are here online or pushing real estate investing as this kind of passive income, retire way sooner than you would have normally or otherwise online. So I would say, in summary, that is what I think you should know before getting into real estate investing is, while sure, it is a way to retire early, oftentimes the expectations kind of set out, especially in those early phases, is just completely wrong. It is truly building a business, albeit franchise type model, from the ground up, not this plug and play. One property is going to increase your monthly income by $300, $400 per month, and you're going to be able to use that $300 to $400 per month however you want to, in order to subsidize some of your expenses that you're struggling with or something. That is a wholly irresponsible way to frame real estate investing. And, whenever I make that really large explanation, like the next natural kind of question that comes from that is, well, if you say that 10% capital expenditures and 10% repair maintenance is insufficient, then what would you say is a good reserve for someone to kind of set aside so that they don't have to kind of dip into the cash flow or be in that pain or that position of just hoping and waiting that nothing else is going to go wrong with that property while you're recovering from those expenses? And I would say, just like I say how real estate investing, there's as many different ways to invest in real estate as there are people investing in real estate. I would say that as far as setting a reserve for a property, it is just as unique to each property as the number of properties that you are going to purchase. So there's no cookie cutter way to know how much reserves to put aside for each property. However, what I would say that I'm very comfortable with, and it is as cookie cutter as it possibly can be, is I would take the property that you are purchasing and I would be brutally honest with yourself and figure out the 2 largest capital expenditure items that are on that property. If it has a new roof on it, then the roof is not that thing, right? However, if it has a really old roof on it, but it has like 5-6 years left on it, maybe best case scenario, I would go ahead and earmark the fact that it needs a new roof. I would get a quote or two, informal, because you're not going to replace it for the next 5 or 6 years, but you just want a ballpark estimate of how much that roof is going to cost. So if that roof costs $15,000, you need to go ahead and say, hey, I need to have at least $15,000 for that roof. So I would pick the two largest items and I would go ahead and I would do that through, and I would have enough money aside for that property to replace the two uh, largest expenses that that property is likely going to bring you. So if it's a new roof and a new HVAC system, then I would get quotes and I would set that amount per side. If it has a new roof and it has a new HVAC system, then I would look at the plumbing. Is it copper? Is it galvanized? And how much does it cost to replumb that whole house? Is that going to be $3,000? And I would say, hey, $3,000. And if a water heater is $1,000, like we said earlier, then I would go ahead and I would have $4,000 in reserves for that property. I'm comfortable with that because it's got a new roof, it has a new HVAC system, and the only things that are going to be coming due anytime soon might be the plumbing and might be that water heater. So that's kind of how I would be comfortable in figuring out how much reserves that I would need per property. Now that completely changes though once you hit that kind of critical mass or whatever, law of large averages or law of large numbers, about when your cash flow is in turn going to be sufficient to handle anything that might come up with that property. So after all of your expenses, not counting the capital expenditures, repair, maintenance percentage, after all of just your mortgage payment, your taxes, your insurance, anything else that you might have to pay, property management, all of that. So if you've got your income minus those initial expenses, once you have $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per month coming in, then that $5,000 is going to be able to be used to make any sort of repair necessary on that. So as your income increases on that front, then the hefty reserve requirements of potentially $20,000 per property is going to lessen, because you've got, in addition to the capital sitting aside for the first couple properties that you purchased where you're waiting on those big items to go, you also now have more cash flow that's going to come up with, it's going to be able to cover anything that might happen to any of these properties less than $5,000 just from that cash flow. So I know one person that I spoke with, he said that his number at the time was like right around 250,000. And he pretty much said, hey, once you have 250,000, the chances of you needing to fully utilize those funds for capital expenditure or repairs and maintenance type things all at once is pretty slim. And at that point, you also have a portfolio bringing in a decent amount of money, replenishing that. And you will also have access to additional capital via lines of credits or the equities in those properties, where in the event that something is an emergency, you can pay for it out of that 250. And otherwise, you can plan or restructure some of your existing assets or lines of credits to cover things beyond that. Just like that, I think I answered two really solid questions.
Thanks for watching that clip. I thought that was a good question. And I think you can ask good questions too. Join us every Friday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a live stream Q&A where we answer plenty of questions just like this one. In the meantime, consider subscribing to the channel if you want more of this content. And if you want to increase your deal flow, analyze properties better, and help me feed my family, click the link below for a free 7-day trial of PropStream.